Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. Welcome back to Nephrology Grand Rounds. I am really pleased that our pediatric nephrology colleagues have been able to coordinate this particular session with us today. I'm really excited about our lineup. As previously, we're going to have one of our University of Washington speakers speak first, have a short break to grab some coffee, and then we have our visiting professor. So I'm going to start by handing it over to Dr. Sangeeta Hingorani, who's going to speak to us on sabbaticals.
So thank you for inviting me to speak. And I chose this title, Yes, Virginia, There is a Sabbatical, because when I first told people that I was going to take a sabbatical, they said, no, you're not. It doesn't exist. We don't have sabbaticals. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm taking one, so we'll see. So I have nothing to disclose as it pertains to this talk. And here's a brief outline. I was warned that if I was going to talk about sabbatical, to make sure I put in there information on how you can apply for a sabbatical, because then otherwise everyone would just hate me. But so here's some information I will present about how you can apply for a sabbatical, kind of the goals of the sabbatical, both from the University of Medicine point of view and our department, as well as my own goals. A couple of the research projects and personal projects that I wanted to work on during my time away, and some views of Madrid. And what you see on the right side is this little taberna that was around the corner from my apartment in Madrid. And the Casa de Alberto was this great little place. They had vermouth on tap. And Tita was the bartender and always greeted you with a warm smile. So this is the definition of a sabbatical. It is a period of paid leave that is granted to a university teacher or other worker for study or travel. And you can use this time however you wish. You can take it for rest, you can work on writing, you can work on research, or you can do work on yourself. It's really pretty open. Whoops. There are some requirements, however. You have to have been at the university for 7 years and promoted to associate professor. And for every 7 years that you work here, you are allowed up to 1 year of sabbatical leave. Once you take that year sabbatical, though, you are committed to stay for 1 year at least after you take your sabbatical. Applications are due December 1st for the next academic year. And your dates that you're going to take off have to coincide with UW academic quarters. And you can take multiple quarters, but you have to align them with the UW calendar. You need approval from your department chair and the provost of the University of Washington. So there is a formal UW application, and I will show that to you in the next slide. It's very simple. It is 1 page. You need to attach to that and a letter to your chair and a letter to the provost that says why you're going to leave, what you're going to do at this time, what projects you want to complete, and kind of what's the time frame for getting those done. And then they want the details of who are you going to be working with, what are you working on, and where are you going to do this. If you have funding, they want you to include on that application what funding might be available, whether it's grant funding or if you have FTE from some other administrative role that you have that might be available. So I'm co-director of our Fellows College. I had 0.1 FTE for that, and I was able to use that towards my salary while I was on sabbatical. And I had to phone in for a couple of meetings if it worked with my schedule. And the time difference didn't always work because I was in Madrid 9 hours ahead. You have to have a CV in the UW School of Medicine format, and again, a letter of support from your department chair. So this is the application. That's it. 1 page. And it's really very easy. And those little sections are what we just talked about. You have to include. And then you submit it. And down on the bottom is all the information in that link on how to take your sabbatical. So a little bit more about funding. So we are very fortunate in the Department of Pediatrics that one of our previous department chairs, I think it was Bruder, actually started an endowment for a research sabbatical that would support a few faculty members a year to take a sabbatical and provide some salary support. There is grant support. Again, if you have grants, you can use that to support your salary. If you have an endowed chair, you can also use that, but only one endowment can be used per sabbatical. And then if there's any division resources, you can also use those if they're applicable. As a faculty member at the University of Washington, though, if you take a sabbatical, they will cover up to 40% of your salary. And you have to have an FTE that's at 0.75 or above. So the goals of the sabbatical, as they say on the UW, is the purpose is for professional leave with pay to increase the scholarship and professional development of members of the faculty. And my goals were, well, there were many. There were some professional goals and some personal goals. But as many of you know, I started my career kind of investigating the kidney injury that occurs after bone marrow transplant. And that's where I started. But along the way, I have branched out into other things. And some of the questions that I chose to study are personal ones, right? That's how we choose things that are personal to us, that impact a family member or something. And that's how I ended up studying the longer term outcomes of premature children. And then other investigations that I've done is because I realized we weren't asking the right questions. And in fact, we really weren't asking the question at all. And that's how I got interested and started working in the area of food insecurity. When I had an interview with a medical student from the University of Chicago, and then experiences with my own dialysis patients, realizing we weren't asking. And so we needed to start doing that. And I'll just tell you a really funny story, because it's actually 20 years ago, about this time of year, where I gave my first renal grand rounds when we were at the Northwest Kidney Center. And I had just signed on as faculty and had had my twins. And I talked about my K award and my kidney injury ideas and what I wanted to do. And Dr. Barry Brenner was invited to speak that day. I don't know if any of you remember that he came. And after I spoke, he spoke. And I was glad I went first, because who wants to follow Dr. Brenner? That's a hard act to follow. And he spoke about his nephron endowment hypothesis and prematurity and being small, low birth weight, and the outcomes and the risks for chronic kidney disease and hypertension and proteinuria later in life. So I went up to him afterwards and said, I just had 34-week twins. They were in the NICU for 3 weeks. One was 5 pounds, 4 ounces. The other was 4 pounds, 14 ounces. What do I do? Like, do I really need to worry? He's like, yes, you really need to worry. Especially for that 4 pound, 14 ounce one, Zubin. He is in high risk. You need to put him on a low salt diet, all these things. And I was like, but is it every baby? Like, maybe mine aren't going to have that. It can't be. Like, where's the data on this? Like, we don't know what nephron endowment is. So I remember at 5, we were sitting at dinner and the boys asked for some extra salt on the food. And I was like, no, you cannot have that salt shaker. You were born with a decreased nephron mass, and you need to live a healthy life, and you need to exercise. And they just looked at me like, what? What is nephron mass? And Charles, my husband, just says, you're crazy. Just let it go. But anyway, so that's how I ended up with those research interests. But I really chose to focus on 2 things: the kidney injury and food insecurity for my sabbatical. And for me also, it was, you know, we get on this track, right? We're physician scientists, or we're not, but we've gone down this path in medicine. And I can only write grants so many times and get the not funded, where it's like, okay, let's take a step back. And is this really what I want to do and where I want to go? And so it was time for me to step away and to really reflect on where I want to go next and what do I want to do. So a little bit about the professional journey at first. This is a picture from the Dali Museum that is just outside of Girona. And if you get a chance to visit, you should really go. What I wanted to use this time for was to gain perspective. Perspective on what I'd done, perspective on where I wanted to go, and just kind of take stock. Had I done all I wanted to do, or all I felt like I could do at Children's? Had I hit that proverbial glass ceiling? Was there more? And did it involve being at Children's, or did it mean going out into the community and doing more of the work that I was passionate about? And I like this view as you enter, because wherever you stand in this room, you get a different perspective of the artwork. And that painting that looks like Abraham Lincoln when you're in the room is actually a beautiful nude of his wife. But when you try to take a picture of it, you can never capture that. So I have been interested in working in food insecurity, primarily in the dialysis population. And so I wanted to use the 2 months that I was in Seattle to work out in the community, seeing what was going on and who was doing this work in the community. And that's just a definition for food insecurity that we all know. And here I am cooking a meal for refugees that live up north. And the gentleman who's the main chef right there was himself an Iraqi refugee and had cooked in the refugee camps for all his the people there, and he wanted to continue that work here in Seattle. So this is a community kitchen that's in a church, and every week they prepare these meals. I also met a woman named Adasha Turner, and she started a nonprofit called Modest Family Solutions, and she is a force to be reckoned with. She has been feeding her community with a farm in her backyard. She has been collecting food when farmers can't harvest anymore. She mobilizes people to get this food and get it to the people in need. And you can just see some of what she's done throughout the pandemic. I met with her and we talked about wanting to take these hydroponic farms and put them in a community that has been designated a food desert here in Seattle, and try and teach them to grow their own food so they have access all the time. And then with a community kitchen in their neighborhood, teach them how to cook the food so it's culturally appropriate, but also healthy. And so we submitted a grant on this Compass mechanism to do exactly that, to change the structural environment that leads to these health inequities. That unfortunately wasn't funded, but we did repurpose it, and it'll get reviewed, I think, in the next week or two. So we'll see if we're successful the second time around. But this is what we called the urban farm. So you're growing the food hydroponically, and you're able to grow vertically tomatoes, lettuce, everything, beans, things that you want. And she has been doing this in her backyard. And this isn't new, this method of farming. It was actually published in Nature in 1938. And a gentleman named Garricky had been doing hydroponic farms, and he had been able to grow 10 tons of tomatoes in 10 square feet. So they thought, I guess at the time, that it would take on, change the way we farm. We'd be able to feed people, grow more food in smaller amount of space without the use of soil. But it really hasn't taken off. But we'll see, maybe we can change that. And then this is the work that brought me to Spain. I should thank Dr. Engelfinger for inviting me to write this review, because it really made a connection with me with the head of one of the BMT programs in Madrid. Because after reading this, he invited me to speak at one of the European BMT meetings, and I'd only met him once and had been on some calls with him as steering committee. And I just reached out to him and said, hey, I want to come to Madrid. I can speak Spanish. I wanted to work on my fluency. What do you think if I come and spend 4 months with you? He was like, sure. We don't think about the kidney. We don't actually know what to do with the kidney after BMT. And so why don't you come and work with us? We'd love to have you. So that's how I ended up in Madrid. So I left March 1st and arrived March 2nd with COVID, which was fun. But I can tell you that you can get food delivered very quickly to your home with Amazon and Glovo. Anyway, the picture on the left is the Plaza Santa Ana, which was a block from my apartment. And the picture on the right is the street that I lived on. And I was on the fourth floor. And the neighborhood was Las Letras, and it was just lovely. You could walk everywhere. There were markets, and it was a great place to be for 4 months, I have to say. So, of course, being from Seattle, you had to find a coffee shop, and there was one around the corner. The one problem is that it didn't open till 8, and I left my apartment at 7 or 7:15. So it was hard to find any place open that early for a cup of coffee, but it was fun. So a typical workday in Madrid for me was starting at 7:15 in the morning, and it's just as the city is waking up. And I would walk about 2 miles to Moncloa through the city, and I would meet one of the other physicians there, and he would drive me out of the city to Mahadonda, which is where the hospital was that I was working. And I loved this time of day because people are just waking up. The city's just waking up. They're sweeping the front doors, of their little cafes and all. And it was just lovely. And these are just some other views around as I made my way and walked. That's Plaza de España, which is one of the main plazas in Madrid. But this is what I got to walk to and from every day. Some other views. And that right there, that arch and all, is Moncloa, where I would meet him, or I would take the bus out to the hospital. And this is the hospital where I worked. It is a about 600-bed hospital, started in 1964, and it serves about 450,000 people. They have 40 subspecialties. There's about 700 faculty, 300 and some odd residents. And they're doing great care, right? They're doing CRRT, they're doing CAR T cell therapies, they're doing transplants, and they do it all without the urgency and the stress. There are no 4 a.m. labs. They don't even want to know a lab at 4 a.m. Even when the patient I was really worried about is like, they need dialysis, we're going into a Friday, like we need to check labs. So I text in the morning, like, it's 7 a.m. Our labs are at 10. The guy looks fine. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, don't you want to talk to your nephrologist early? It's Friday. They're like, no, we're good. Okay. So I learned you don't have to stress, and the patient did fine. He was fine. They were right. Anyway, so it is a teaching hospital that's associated with a medical school, and the training there is different. I learned that if you're going to do a subspecialty, you do 1 year of medicine, and that's ER, urgent care, those kinds of things. And then you go into your subspecialty training, and you do 3 additional years of either hematology or oncology. And in pediatrics, if you want to do nephrology, you do 3 years of peds and then just 1 year of nephrology training there. So it's very different. So I found when I was in clinic with the physicians, they didn't have the same comfort level with managing or changing blood pressure medications or things like that, because they hadn't had those 3 years, in internal medicine to do this. There are inpatient and outpatient clinics, and a typical workday is from 8 to 3. 8 to 3. Nice. And then at 2:30 or 3, what they do is they go for lunch. And this lunch starts with, I'll have a beer. Let's have some wine. And it's a 2-hour lunch. But what's lovely is you're talking, right? You're communicating, you're making connections and getting to know people. And then you go home, and I needed a nap, but it was okay because I really didn't have anything to do the rest of the day. So this is the part I think where Brian was going to say everyone was going to hate me if I talked about sabbatical. Anyway, I did do work there. I did, and when I first got there, I felt guilty about, being out for 10 days with COVID. And then I quickly got over that and decided I didn't want to go in every day. I was going to go in 3 days a week. But they met every morning. On Mondays, they would review patients at 8:15. And then I worked in the outpatient clinics Monday and Thursday. And then I did inpatient rounds every Wednesday, because that's when the division head was doing rounds with the whole team. All of this took place in Spanish, which was great. And I just got to offer advice or insights, or maybe what's the weight on that patient? What's the blood pressure? Like, what's the creatinine? And so it was really very nice to not have to worry about epic notes and follow-up and billing or any of that. I was able to just be a consultant, and it was lovely. But after they have their morning report, this is their cafeteria. They all go en masse to have coffee and breakfast. And then their workday starts after that. So at 9:30, they saunter into clinic. And this is a typical clinic room. Nothing particularly special. There is an exam table as well that you can't see. You can see it in the picture on the right. That microscope is to look at blood smears, not urine. I tried to get them to get urines on patients, and that was hard. I tried to get them to get a blood pressure, which was also hard. And these are, they're seeing, and yes, I know, they're acute. These are like, after transplant, 30, 40 days, all your patients are hypertensive. So I finally found the blood pressure machines and kept it in the clinic room so I could check. It made me feel better. But it's rare. They like hardly ever did a physical exam. And Carlos, who was one of the young physicians I was working with, brought his stethoscope in one day just for me. So he could say, I have one. I'm like, well, are you going to use it? He's like, no, I want you to listen to my lungs. I have asthma and I'm having trouble breathing. I was like, okay, here we go. It's just different. But their outcomes aren't necessarily any different. So we started, I did have to do some research, right? I had proposed that I was going to do something. And so we did. And we first started talking to them about the questions they wanted to answer. And that started in Malaga over lunch. And I was invited to speak there. And that's the view from where we had our first research meeting with faculty. And they decided on 4 primary questions that they struggled with was, fluid overload and how do they manage that and what's the impact? They hadn't ever looked at any of their outcomes as pertains to kidney injury, either early acute kidney injury or chronic. And then when I tried to push for a urine, they're like, we started getting that and we'd find proteinuria, but we didn't know what to do with it. So we stopped checking. It's like, okay, well, that's one way to do it. But we decided we would take those patients that they had looked at and try and look at outcomes and see if it was at all impactful and should we intervene. And it's a question I still struggle with now. So, and then I did have to give some talks, which was fun. I spoke at the meeting in Malaga to all of the, it was just for all Spanish bone marrow transplant physicians, pediatric and adult, and did some teaching conferences. I spoke to the nurses on fluids and electrolytes and the importance of daily weight so they could record that. And that one had to be done completely in Spanish. So I was allowed to give my first talk in English, and then everyone had to have more Spanish. And the nurses, I was told, don't speak English. And so you have to give this talk in Spanish. And Jordan will tell you that I asked him for his talk, and I have a hard time with fluid and electrolytes in English to give that talk. So in Spanish, it's even harder. But anyway, we survived. I survived, they survived. And then we did a journal club as well. So that picture on the right is their fellows or their residents' graduation party. And it is not one dinner. They rent this house out in the country for the weekend. Mm-hmm. And they have a party on Friday night, and Saturday they invite the attendings and all, and they come. But what happens too, what's really cool is that all the graduating fellows from previous years come back and they spend the weekend with them as well. So it's really very much a family that when you leave this program or you're part of this program, and they all come back to celebrate. And they have really good barbecue. Like, it was amazing, the food that was there. Okay, so we're going to take a little interlude. And we're going to shift really quickly to the personal aspects of this trip. And this was, we were exploring the old part of the city in Girona and came across this pianist. Okay, so there is a personal journey to this. And I want to figure out, and I'm still thinking about it, is kind of what my third act is, right? To quote Jane Fonda, who thinks you live your life until your 30s is one act, 30 to 60 is your second act. And then what are you going to do from 60 and beyond? And I'm getting close to that. Turned 58 in May. So it was time to kind of think about, what does my third act look like? Because I'm not ready to just sit at home and do nothing. I have too many things I want to do, and I feel like too much energy. But I wanted to take the time to really explore what that might be, to read, to write, to reflect. I wanted to work on my Spanish. And I wanted to let go of kind of these measures of success that we have that are kind of put upon us. I didn't want, I wanted to try and define success for myself and see what that was. I made a decision that I was going to say yes to everything. So if someone asked me to do something, I was going to say yes, no matter what it was. Thankfully, there weren't too many crazy things. I was going to go do it. And then I wanted to think about really what brings me joy. I wasn't finding that in my work as much. And I needed to figure it out. Like it's my either how I was feeling, if I was feeling negatively, I was probably projecting that out to the universe, and I didn't want that. So I needed to figure out what it was that I wanted to do and what was going to make me happy. And so Madrid is lovely. And I had the time to really think about that. So I explored the city. That is the Madrid Open I went to. And then the middle picture is Girona. And then I have some friends that had a house out on the coast on Javia and Dania, and I was able to travel with them there for a weekend. So just taking time away, being in a different culture with different people really gives you a chance to reflect. So this picture, I was in my apartment one evening, and outside I hear this drum music going, and I'm like, what is going on? And I lived in the heart of the city, and these Spaniards party all night long. Thankfully, my bedroom faced the inner courtyard. But I was like, what is going on out there? And I look out the window and I see this procession outside my window. And at first I freak out. I'm like, oh my God, it's the KKK. What are they doing? It's not supposed to be here. What's going on? And then you see the band and I'm like, oh, it's a procession. And this is the beginning of their Holy Week, Semana Santa. And I actually took a picture and sent it to one of my friends. I'm like, what is this? And they explained it to me. So I also went to a bullfight because you have to go to a bullfight, apparently, if you're going to be in Madrid in May. And the division head, Rafael Duarte, handed me a book and said, read this, Death in the Afternoon by Ernest Hemingway, all about bullfighting. And in the very first page, this horse that comes out dies. I was like, I don't know that I want to see a bullfight. He's like, no, you have to. So we went and saw the bullfight, and it's an unfair fight from the beginning. There's no way the bull's ever going to win. And if you bring that up, he looks at me like, you want the other guy to die? Like, no, but it's not fair. Anyway, so it was an experience, and I'm glad that I went. I do not feel like I need to go again. Shopping there takes on a different vein, and the food is lovely. So you walk around the corners and there's a fish market and the fish guy and the chicken guy, and you get your fresh vegetables. And it's just, you don't shop for the week. I would go, every day or every other day and get fresh food, and you get to know the people and they get to know you. And so it was really, it's just a very different way of doing things. When I first came back and went to Central Market, I was in culture shock. I was like, it's just too big. There's too much stuff. And of course, there's wines and vermouth. And those bottles of wine were from one of the first dinners we had in Malaga. Like I said, it went on for 4 or 5 hours. And I was like, I've got to be up to speak at 8 a.m. I need to go back. And really what made it for me very special were the people. The people I met. In the top left are the physicians that I worked with at the hospital. On the right are some of those physicians, and Pablo in the glasses is one of the residents who graduated. We were celebrating my birthday. And then on the bottom are some friends I had met once before. The woman had dated my husband's best friend when he went over there and did a semester in Madrid. But they met me at the airport, picked me up, and really were my family away from my family here. And it really made me realize how much I value those kinds of connections and the people in my life and what is important. And they really value those connections as well. So this is the view of my street over time. So when I first arrived in March, and then kind of April, May, and then June when it was time to leave. And it was very hard to leave. My husband was there with me, helping me pack up. And I was like, I don't want to go home. And he's looking at me. I'm like, it's not you. It's Madrid. It's a different life. It's a slower pace, which I appreciated. So the time went by much too quickly. I took flamenco dance classes twice a week. It was fun. It was great. I can't dance very well, but it didn't matter. All that stomping really gets out a lot of your frustrations. I learned to make paella. And I really felt like I found my happy, positive self again. I had a different perspective, a new outlook, and I try to retain that every day while I'm back. And I think that environment and the new people and being in a place where people don't have preconceived notions of you, right? Like they just take you for where you are. And the only thing they knew about me was they were forced to read that New England Journal of Medicine article before I arrived. And so it was great to be able to do that and to see and find those positive things in yourself again. I was energized by my work colleagues and new friends. And really 8 to 3, it's really attractive. It's a good, healthy way and work day, I think. So I have to give thanks for this time to the people in the Department of Pediatrics who supported my application, funded my time away. The Division of Nephrology, my colleagues who covered while I was gone, they covered my patients and my Epic inbox, which was a mess until Joseph just deleted everything. And I was like, wow, we could do that? They all survived. I'm like, okay, I don't know if I responded to that lab, but they'll come back again. Emily is my research assistant who kept the drug company studies going and made sure I did the work I needed to use that money for my FTE. The GME office and Boots, Croman, who is my co-director of the Fellows College, who covered for me. And of course, I couldn't do any of this without the support of my family. And we are in the south of Spain here celebrating our 30th wedding anniversary. So Zubin, the guy with the sunglasses, the tall one, is the premature infant that was 4 pounds, 14 ounces that I'm supposed to worry about. So I think for right now he's fine, but he does see someone get a blood pressure checked and a urine and a creatinine every year if I can get him to go. So, and I leave you with this, a sunrise or a sunset, just kind of depends on your perspective. And a quote from James Baldwin, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And I'm happy to take any questions. I hope you will take a sabbatical. Yeah. Did you miss your family? I did. But you know, it was my husband came to visit. He came in April and then came again in June, and so did my boys. But I realized that it's the first time in as long as I can remember that I was only responsible for me. And that was also very freeing. But yes, I would talk to my husband most daily, you know. My kids are 20 and in college, and my older one's almost 26. And so I communicated with them, but it wasn't like they, you know, needed me and I wasn't seeing them all the time anyway. But yes, you miss them. I was sick. I had Campylobacter the day I went to the bullfight. And that week I was miserable. And it's just, and I'm like, that was the first time that I'd been there that I was like, I want to go home. Like, I just want my bed, you know. But that was really the only time that I was like, I want to go home. I miss home. Yeah.
Have you found a way to implement any of the things you liked about Spain here in Seattle? There are lots of things that you really enjoyed. And
yes. So I try to get people to have lunch. I also have decided that I will not eat lunch staring at my computer screen anymore. So I may be in my office, but I face the other way. And I stare out the window and I take that time. I am trying to work on getting rid of the 4 a.m. labs. So when I was back in the NICU and they would get labs, I was like, I don't want those labs at 4. Let's get them at 6. And they're like, we can do that. I'm like, sure, you're ordering them. I'm not coming for rounds before 8 and no one's really doing that. So I'm working on those kinds of things slowly. Yeah. But it's hard to get people to change. Someone else had. Okay.
How is that 8 to 3 schedule doing for you here in
It's,
Seattle?
you know, it doesn't always work as I planned, but when I first came back, I tried because, you know, Nyan was home for the summer, and so it's like, okay, I'm going to try and see if I can get out early when I'm not in clinic, but it's hard. I think we we should think about it though, right? Like their other team comes on at 3 and they cover overnight until the next morning. So it can be done. Yeah.
What was your language proficiency level before you left? Now it was just
I spoke Spanish pretty well before I left. I didn't have all the medical Spanish, like, rounds. And when I first started, a lot of it was like, I'm not sure what that word is. But it got a lot better. And by the time I was leaving, it didn't feel as stunted. I was starting to think in Spanish and what I wanted to say instead of English and translating in my head. It started just coming out in Spanish. Almost got to the point where I started to dream in Spanish, but apparently that's when you're completely fluent.
That was probably the trip to the Dali Museum, but and they close us there just so we have a few minutes break, but thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.